Welcome to Gravetop Church Online. We love you guys. I'm your host, Homer Hargrove. We are starting a new series called The Agony of Worship. The Agony of Worship. And I feel like when it comes to the topic of worship, we have this general tone that worship is mainly just like, kind of like the butterflies and rainbow part of service. We always do worship at the beginning of church, not us because we're Gravetop, right? But we always typically do worship at the beginning because people are going to show up late and they get right at the end of worship or halfway through, and we just use it as like a buffer zone, a spacer for people that don't really want to be a part of it. And it's just like this almost mysterious thing that's hard to articulate and explain. Like, how is it that just singing songs is connecting me to God? I always find it, even though I love worship, I find it difficult to articulate a response and explanation to why singing and swaying just is a miraculous thing. But my heart in this series is to show that worship is far beyond singing and swaying. It's far beyond even just having emotional moments with God. That worship is a devoted lifestyle with many hard choices. And I pray that through this series, you would not only feel more compelled to engage during the songs and worship part, but that you would feel compelled to engage all of your life to be a living worship to God. I want to start off by today with our title, I'm Not Pretending. I'm not pretending. And I really have a lot that I want to say about this whole series, and I'm trying not to say it all at once, but I want us to look, as we get into today's message, at the story and life of David. David is known for having a heart after God. He's known for being a man after God's own heart. And he has some major character issues that he faces, a lot of failures that he faces in his life, but yet he's always recognized for his heart to please God, his heart to grow closer to God, his heart to worship God. And I want us to look at the moment where he first became famous. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, starting in verse 32, it says, this is the most classic story when David faces Goliath, the giant. And David had just came in from to drop off food for his brothers that were actual soldiers in this war of Israel to battle the Philistines, and he was just there to drop off food. And while he was there, he was hearing about this 1v1 that the Philistines were challenging Israel with, saying, send out your best warrior, and and we'll send out our best warrior, and whoever wins, that they'll win the battle. We'll just do, why waste all this bloodshed? We'll just make it a 1v1. And David shows up on the scene, and Goliath it's been days where he's just been taunting Israel. No one wants to step forward. Everyone is sitting down waiting for somebody else to stand up. And the Philistines are just making fun of Israel's God. And David is getting uncomfortable and upset that this Philistine thinks that he can gloat and bash the name of our God. And at this point in the story, it says, don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go and fight him. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. I want us to just pause for a moment on this verse. Notice that David was ready to fight. But the way that the king saw him, the way that others saw him, the way that his brothers saw him, was that he was just pretending to be a warrior. He's pretending to be a soldier. And that this Philistine over this Goliath, he's an actual soldier. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're doing. This is real deal. You're just pretending. David goes on to say, it says, but David persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. That just is a brutal scene. Like, just imagining like the stray cat beating it to death, let alone a lion. And he goes on to say, I go back and I catch it, club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. And Saul finally consented. All right, go ahead, he said, and may the Lord be with you. I feel like this last thing that Saul says has two sides. One side is like, oh dang, like you went after a lion, a bear, like, all right, like screw it, I guess. I mean, maybe you do got a shot. And then another side of him is like, well, no one else is standing up. God be with you. Good luck. And this passage finishes with, then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. I can't go in these, he protested to Saul. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. You know, closing this passage, I feel like this is just such a peculiar story that we see. And we see this passion in David just beginning. We're just now seeing it. And everyone else thought that David was just pretending to be a warrior.